Namaste. This is Yoga Therapy Podcast, and I'm your host, Shira, yoga teacher, yoga therapist, and Ayurvedic wellness educator. In these conversations with experts in the field of yoga therapy, you'll find out what it is and how it can help you and your loved ones to reclaim well-being. We'll touch on physical as well as mental health, physiology, emotions, women's health, spiritual well-being, goddesses, and self-development in the fullest sense. Listening to another story can change ours, so thank you for showing up, and let's begin this journey together. Okay, so hello everyone. Today we are joined by Leslie Kaminoff. So I was telling him I was a little bit nervous because I followed him for years and then I stopped following him, but he's definitely taught me a lot in anatomy. So thank you for being here, Leslie.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure.
Yeah.
Happy to have a conversation.
Yes. So Leslie is a yoga educator. He's been teaching yoga for 40 years. He's inspired by Desikachar. He's the co-author of the book Yoga Anatomy with Amy Matthews. And you're the founder of the Breathing Project, which you don't do anymore, I believe.
Well, the studio, the Breathing Project, closed its programming in 2017, but it still exists as the nonprofit educational organization that it originally was. So fundamentally, it's an educational nonprofit. For 14 years, we ran a studio here in New York.
Wow.
And I closed the studio in 2017, but Amy kept the space for her work with babies.
Yes.
So it's now called the Babies Project, actually.
Oh,
So it's
wow.
actually still there.
Yeah. Oh, great. And why, when you say non-profit, what do you mean it's non-profit? You weren't making profit from it. You just do it.
Well, no, it's a legal designation for a particular kind of corporation here in the States.
Okay.
We have these organizations called 501c3. That's just the official name of it, which means that we exist for the public's benefit. We have a mission to educate our sort of target community. And it also means that people who donate to support what we're doing can deduct those donations from their taxes. So there's a variety of reasons, both legal and mission-based, to have a nonprofit. Okay. And I started it in toward the end of 2001 into 2002 is when we started the Breathing Project as a nonprofit, and eventually a year or so later we started running the studio. Okay.
Well, let's begin at the very beginning and tell us about your yoga story.
All right.
Yeah.
So, like, how did I get started?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, my dad, who recently passed away, was doing yoga here in New York at the Shivananda Yoga Center.
Oh, wow.
And that was part of a sort of a midlife crisis thing that he was going through at the time, because he realized that he had never sort of subconsciously planned to outlive his father, who had dropped dead of a heart attack at age 48 or something. So, when he got to be that age and he was still alive, he realized he had sort of the rest of his life to live. And so he made a lot of lifestyle changes. He stopped drinking and he started eating more healthily, and started doing yoga. He started running marathons. So he really turned his life around at that point. And I was just starting to live and work on my own here in New York City. I was 19 or so when I started living on my own. I wasn't really interested in school. I don't function well in other people's
learning spaces,
structured learning environments. I'm more of a self-learner. So I just, after one brief semester at an alternative college, I just started living and working on my own, and was like, hey, I've got a job, I'm paying rent, who needs college? So I just started doing that. And I began to notice that I needed to pay attention to my body at that age, because it wasn't moving as easily and gracefully as I wanted it to. I very much admired dancers and the way they moved through life. Only later did I realize how injured they were as a community, because that became a big part of my clientele once I started doing body work.
Yeah.
But so I actually started with taking some basic ballet classes here in New York.
Oh, really?
Yeah, at the Joffrey School. Joffrey was a company that used to be based here in New York. But I realized very quickly that I was never going to be very good at that. I just was too much of a klutz. But it was around that time that my father invited me to take a yoga class with him at the Shivananda Center, and I did. And that was something that I felt I could make really rapid progress in. You know, the learning curve is quite steep when you first start, particularly when you're young and you've never done any kind of conscious breath and movement, or most notably relaxation before. It was the final relaxation that really got me hooked. And so I signed up for a beginner's course. And by the next summer, which was 1979, I found myself at their ashram up in Canada doing a month-long teacher's training course.
Oh, wow, really?
Yeah. And one thing led to another, and that's the only career I've ever had. It's just, I don't have a strong plan B at this point. At age 64, if this yoga thing doesn't work out, I'm kind of screwed.
Well, I think you're fine. I think the yoga teachers who started so long ago and they've built up this reputation, they're still cruising, no? Am I right in presuming that?
Well, it's somewhat, but I mean, you know, the yoga industry as a whole is kind of in a shambles right now after COVID and quarantine and studios closing and everything shifting to online, and you know
But I think
it was due for
shambles. I think every business is in a shambles right now. Marketing and pharma, I think that's and tech, but everything else is just being drained. Yeah.
Right. Well, it's a major reorganization, which I think was we saw it coming even before COVID. Just looking at the landscape of you know, the life of a touring yoga teacher.
Okay.
You know, I was in Amsterdam in 2019 and all over Europe. I was teaching in Germany and, you know, Australia. In fact, it was in Australia in 2020, in March of 2020, that I got sick with COVID and brought that home with me. But I was all over the place. And we saw the writing on the wall a little bit because the market had gotten quite saturated. You know, it's very easy to wear out your welcome if you keep coming back to places year after year.
But I'm surprised people still come to my classes.
Yeah. You know what I mean? And but also a lot of the education, you know, we were early adopters with the internet. We put courses up over 12 years ago. Our first online courses were put up over 12 years ago. And this is before it was that much of a thing. So, you know, we saw the pendulum shifting to more of an online focus for delivering certain kinds of information, certain kinds of educational experiences. And, you know, that's actually part of what killed the conferences too, I think. You know, if you think about, you know, at the peak, Yoga Journal was having conferences many times a year in many different locations, and internationally there were conferences all over the place, which, you know, some of which I taught at, and you know, that's really started dying down about 5-6 years ago.
Already before.
Oh, sure. Because, you know, if you just look at the expense of getting your body physically from wherever you live to wherever a conference is happening, and then, you know, feeding yourself and housing yourself on top of paying for the conference.
But also the physiological effects of time change and difference of place.
Yeah, it's what we would call a schlep to get someplace, and it's expensive. And what for? So you can spend 2 hours in a room with someone like me, or Rodney Yee, or Sean Korn, or Shiva Ray, or whatever, you know. And it's great. I mean, nothing could ever replace being in the same space, breathing the same air as the people you want to learn from. I mean, that will always be the core of
Yoga.
what I think is most valuable and resonant for us.
Yeah.
But if you take all of that money that you spent putting yourself in that room and see what it can buy you in terms of online education, there's no comparison. You could pay for an entire course of study that's been systematically laid out, that you could do at your own pace, that you could still have interaction with the teacher, maybe not in person, but online or something like that. So that was just, an economic thing for people. Is like when you look at what you have to spend as a yoga teacher or a yoga therapist on your education on a yearly basis, and you look at investing it into going to one of these conferences or signing up for those very same teachers who each have their own platforms at this point. Everyone was developing their own platform for online delivery. And we didn't, the teachers, unless you're at the very, very top of the food chain, it's like you're the marquee name that's going to get people to sign up for this conference. And you can count on those people on one hand, pretty much. And we all know who they are, right? So those were the people that were getting paid by the conference something substantial to be teaching there. I was never one of those people. And I was getting paid less to teach at some of these conferences that I would have made if I'd stayed home and seen private clients for the same period of time without all the hassle, right? So why are we showing up? We're showing up because we have our own stuff that we want people to sign up for. We have, I had my online courses. Right. And I wanted to be out there showing people what it was that I was teaching and connecting with them and letting them know that they could sign up and have these studies with me. And that was what was really providing a substantial part of my income for a while, was the enrollments in the online courses. So you're showing up, not making much money at a conference, just to promote your other stuff. And a lot of the teachers were in that same position. Exactly. And it just wasn't sustainable from the conference's standpoint in terms of being a viable business. They were losing, Yoga was losing enormous sums of money on their conferences toward the end. Yeah. And they had competition from, other conferences that had popped up, like Wanderlust and whatever. So, yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So the writing was on the wall even before COVID started driving the final nails in that coffin.
But don't you think people are going to get sick of it? I mean, we've been now 2 years stuck in homes using screen for everything. I feel what I'm seeing from people, we're just kind of realizing unconsciously that this is not healthy, fun, or fulfilling.
Well, to do everything on screen that you would have been doing in real life. Yeah. I mean, sure. But the online component of education, whether it's in yoga or any other field, is never going away.
No, it's not going away. But I think people are waking up to the fact that the other component, the live component, has different benefits that you will never.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. And I think
I don't think anyone ever forgot that. We just learned to live without it for a while,
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. But we're getting back to it. We're getting back to it now. I just got back from an in-person event that we taught in Colorado. It was a 5-day long cadaver dissection based anatomy workshop.
Yes.
And that was pretty well attended.
What's well attended mean?
Well, for us, the lab, we're using the Institute for Anatomical Research in Colorado Springs. And my good friend Gil Headley is one of the principals in that lab. And it's a small lab. It's very much like it's a very family-oriented place. It's not a big commercial operation at all.
No, but that's good.
Yeah. And they have a direct donor program. People can donate themselves directly to that lab.
Oh, wow. So the person you're operating on.
Yeah. I mean, unless you're in the Colorado area, the logistics of getting a body there are a little daunting, but there are local people who who knew about the work they were doing and just wanted to be there when they died. And many donors have come through there under those conditions. But we had 3 tables, three cadavers, 6 people at each table. So that for us was a full lab. We can put more people per table, and we can put 1 more table there. We can have a total of 4 if we're really filling the space. And we may, in fact, be doing that next year, because we have a lot of folks who said they want to come back and they want to bring their students and their friends and so on.
Wow.
So, yeah. But it's not a cheap thing. Like,
no, of course not.
You know, it's like a $2,500 fee to enroll, because cadavers aren't cheap. Labs.
I can imagine.
Yeah. But it would cost more than $2,500 to just go to, let's say, another city for a weekend for a conference, if you add everything up together. You know, the travel and the food and the hotel and the conference fees and everything else. So, you know, it's an investment for people in their education, and one that everyone seemed to really appreciate once they were there. It's like a bucket list items. Like, once in your life, if you're really into anatomy, you would owe it to yourself to experience what it's like to do it in a cadaver lab.
Yeah, but don't people get queasy? I've had to operate on my dog.
Sure.
He had some accident, and it was like, I went green.
Yeah. No, and that's just a visceral reaction people have. It's not necessarily voluntary. Some people pass out at the sight of blood, you know, if they're donating blood. It's just it's like a vagal response for a lot of people, and they faint. Yeah.
But no one has that in the training?
No, just in general. I mean, you know, phlebotomists, people who draw blood, see it all the time. You know, certain percentage of people are going to pass out at the sight of blood. More men than women, by the way.
I've heard that, yes.
Well, I mean, there's a perfectly practical explanation for that. Women are accustomed to seeing their own blood on a regular basis, right? It's less likely going to freak out at the sight of their own blood. Cadaver lab's not for everyone. It's not for everyone, for sure. Not everyone has the constitution, but a lot of people do surprise themselves, who feel, you know, not so confident about it, and then but their curiosity sort of overcomes their whatever fear they have of being in the environment. And the way we handle it is very, very respectful. It's very much, you know, there's no wrong way to be here, is what we tell people, including needing to go out and get fresh air, or take a break, or, you know, have a conversation with someone, or whatever. And, you know, I have the bodywork table set up in the other room, and I've had people on the table working with them and working with their breathing and saying, hey, you know, here's the thing we're looking at now, and here's what it's like in your body to stretch that thing, and let's go back and look at it in the cadaver. And, you know, it's a very interactive, movement-based process that we do. It's not just passively cutting and memorizing and naming things. It's like, what does this do? How does this feel in your body? How does it feel in someone else's body when you're working with them? So to have a lab taught by someone like me and someone like Lori Nemitz, who I co-teach with, lifelong movement people. Lori is a dancer. She's a movement educator. You know, she is also a master dissector. So, you know, we bring that element into it, and the breath. We bring the breath into it. We'll inflate the lungs.
Oh, really?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. From all these different perspectives, you know, we will open the rib cage one way on one cadaver and a different way on another, and we'll have the bag, you know, in the airway, and we'll inflate the lungs and show you what they look like. We had one of the donors had severe emphysema, that we got to see what that looks like. What does it look like when this disease destroys lungs?
What does it look like?
What does it look like? It looks like the lungs, instead of being healthy pink alveolar tissue, the remnants of them are blackened, because this is almost always from smoking. And then it's like an empty cellophane bag. without lung in it, because the pleura, the covering of the lungs, the visceral pleura, is still there, and it's sort of like a cellophane bag, but there's nothing inside of it.
Wow.
And so it's just these empty air pockets where air gets trapped and can't get out. And so it's a horrible disease to live with. So, but we got to see what that looks like, and we got to compare it with healthier looking lungs.
Yeah. You know? And how long dead are these people? Or that doesn't matter, they get frozen?
These people passed away in February, pretty recent. Because we work almost exclusively these days with what we call unfixed, meaning they've not been embalmed. So they're put in coolers right away, and the bodies actually arrive to the lab frozen for transport, and then we thaw them to the temperature that we need to have them at to work with them, and then when we're done working, we put them back in the cooler. So you can get a good week out of the cadaver there without any embalming at all if you manage the temperature well, and you get to see as closely as possible what the tissues look like in life in terms of color and texture and movement, especially. And so the room has to be really cold as well, or not? It's not super cold in the room. I mean, we don't let it get hot, but we layer. You know, we keep it properly chilled. But not freezing. I mean, living humans have to be there too. It's not like a walk-in. It's not like a walk-in refrigerator. But you don't want to let it get too warm. No. I can imagine. Okay. So I mean, your fingers need to work. I mean, you're working tools, so you can't have numb fingers. It can't be too cold. What, 10 degrees Celsius, something like that? I don't know 10 degrees Celsius. Celsius makes no sense to me for measuring temperature. For me, Fahrenheit makes no sense. I know. No. Okay, you want me to tell you why Fahrenheit makes sense? Yes. Okay. Tell me. On a scale of 0 to 100, with 0 being really cold and 100 being really hot, what's the temperature? That's Fahrenheit. Okay. Celsius, half of the scale is useless for weather. First of all. Seriously, right? From 0 to 100 in Celsius, you've only got 0 to 50 that could ever happen. I mean, you can never get hotter than 50 degrees. Right? Well, you can. When you but not outside, not in the weather, in a laboratory, maybe. Right? You cook your water at 100 degrees Celsius. Yeah, but I'm talking for weather. Okay, you're just talking for weather. Okay. Fahrenheit is for human weather. Yeah, but still, I don't know. For me, it makes sense when you say to me, it was minus 25 degrees. I was like, wow, that's really cold. And we say, well, that's really cold in Fahrenheit really too. Hot. Huh? Minus 40 is the same in both, by the way. Is it? Oh. That's where they meet. Fahrenheit and Celsius meet at minus 40. Oh. Okay. I've experienced minus 40. I've experienced minus 25. It's really cold. Minus 40 is really cold. Well, I can imagine. You just don't, I think once it gets past minus 20, you just don't know how cold it is, but it's very because you're numb at that point. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. But anyway, so we keep the lab at around below 70 degrees Fahrenheit for sure. It's more like mid 60s Fahrenheit in the lab. I'll have to look that up. I don't know the conversion. No, but let's get back to your story. So you started doing yoga with the Shivananda. You got your training, and how did you get to Desikachar? Let's just jump over there. I met Desikachar in 1988, so I'd already been teaching yoga for 9 years. Oh, wow. I left the Shivananda organization in 1982. I worked very intensely with them for a short period of time. I became a Swami. I was assigned directorship of a yoga community in Los Angeles as a young Swami. Were you a renunciate? Did you want to be a renunciate? I did. Well, I really annoyed Swami Vishnu about initiating me, and I didn't go through the usual preparatory steps. So I got kind of an exemption. I was in India at the time in 1981, and I came back a Swami after having been initiated, and they sent me right off to this yoga community that they had in West Hollywood in Los Angeles. And so I was director there for a couple of years, but I actually only lasted as a Swami for about 9 months. I realized very quickly it wasn't my path. And
Why?
I wasn't, I was just being honest with myself, you know. Some people stick with it because in that organization, at least, that's where you get authority, that's where you get power, that's where, you know, you basically have a job security within that organization, but you're not necessarily keeping all of your vows. Let's just put it that way.
Okay.
Yeah, but I couldn't do that. I was a little too honest with myself and everyone else, and said, look, this isn't for me. But I did stay on as director after renouncing my vows for almost another year. But then I left and started working independently in Los Angeles, and that's where I was introduced to sports medicine, working with athletes, learning a lot more about anatomy, kinesiology.
And that was interesting to you straight away?
Oh yeah, well, the curiosity was there from the beginning when I started watching people's bodies move, and wondering why some people could do certain things and not other things, and learning some of the underlying anatomy of that would explain why certain ranges of motion were possible for certain people and not others. And then when I started working at the International Sports Medicine Institute, it was through a connection with my girlfriend at the time, someone I was living with, who was an athlete herself, and was friends with this doctor who was just starting the institute. And I kind of got in there and was surrounded by world-class athletes who were training for the Olympics, which was in Los Angeles in 1984.
Wow.
So it was a very sort of fortunate bit of timing and connection for me, because I am the observe and absorb kind of learner, and I got to observe so much of what was going on there and absorb it. And I eventually got some training in hands-on techniques as well with some of the people that were working there. And so it was a very rich period of learning and exposure to me to all of these different things. And I developed my own ideas about breathing and moving, and I was very curious about breathing in particular, because of something I had heard that it turns out came from Desikachar. I didn't really know much about who he was or what he taught, but my friend, who I just visited with in Los Angeles, Larry Payne, one of the founders of International Association of Yoga Therapists, was just starting his studio back in the early 80s in Los Angeles. And I got to know him when I was director of the Shivananda Center. And he had just gotten back from a trip to India where he had visited all of the major centers of learning. He was in Lonavala at the Kavalyadam. He was in Pune to visit with the Iyengar's, and he went to Rishikesh, and he went to Madras. And all the names he mentioned of the teachers that he visited, I had heard of, except for this guy in Madras, Desikachar. And he was the one he was most impressed with. And eventually, of course, Larry became a very prominent student of Desikachar's. And I said, well, what's so impressive about this guy? And he said, it's all in the breath. That's all he would say about it.
Mystery.
It's all in the breath.
Yeah.
And that was it. But it stuck in my mind. It stuck in my mind. And I said, well, if it's all in the breath, then maybe I should start paying attention a little bit more about how I'm breathing when I practice and how the people I'm teaching are breathing. And so out of that, I developed a real sort of affinity for this way of looking at people, and an anatomical curiosity about the structures of breathing and how they related to the spine and movement in general. Fast forward about 7 years from there, I read an article. It was actually based on an interview in Yoga Journal that David Frawley, had written
Mhm.
about this teacher that he had connected with in Hawaii named Gary Kraftsow.
Uh-huh.
And so this was David interviewing Gary and writing this article for Yoga Journal. And some of the things that Gary was saying about his teacher and how he taught really resonated with me, because it sounded like some of the stuff that I was saying based on this, 7 or so years of exploring breath and movement and things. And so I became very curious about his teacher, who it turns out was Desikachar.
Okay.
So that's when the light bulb started going off, and I realized, well, there seems to be a pretty evolved system out there that it would be good to investigate, because why reinvent the wheel if someone
totally
is really knowledgeable about this, and there's a tradition that teaches this way. And that's when I signed up for my first Unity in Yoga conference, because Gary was teaching at it, and I wanted to go and pick his brain about the way he taught, because I wasn't about to fly to Hawaii and study with him, because I had a life in a studio in New York. I already had my own yoga studio in New York at that point.
Wow.
So this is like 1987.
Okay.
And so I met Gary. I'm sure I was very annoying. I asked a lot of questions. And he told me that Desikachar was teaching that next summer, which would be in the summer of 1988, at Colgate University in upstate New York, a week-long public seminar.
Wow. Wow.
And that the week after the public seminar was a private week where they were just starting the very first American-based Vini Yoga certification program. That got me excited. Anyone could sign up for the first week, and I did, but you had to be accepted into the second week.
Okay.
You had to apply, you had to be accepted, and there was a committee called Vini Yoga America of Desikachar's senior American students who were approving these applications. And I sent in an application, absolutely convinced that
Get in.
That I was destined to be in this program. And of course I was rejected because no one knew who the hell I was. I mean, all these people had their own students. Yeah. I mean, they had their own students who were applying. So of course they were going to say yes to their.
But was this the Vini Yoga from Kraftsow? Or there's no.
No. See, that's a later development.
Okay.
Gary inherited the name Vini Yoga for his organization. But back in the mid-late 80s, there was Vini Yoga America. Okay. And it was just the designation for the way everyone taught in Desikachar's lineage, right? Vini Yoga America was later dissolved at the request of Desikachar. And then Gary sort of inherited that name, which Desikachar told him to name his organization Vini Yoga America, not Vini Yoga America, American Vini Yoga Institute, AVI, right? So, but that's a later story. The real fun part happened when I was rejected from this program, and I found out the names of all the people on the committee and started annoying them. I started writing them letters and calling them on the phone, and they didn't know me from Adam, and here's this guy just being a real pain in the ass, and I still didn't get in.
You knew you were being a pain in the ass?
I was, of course I was being a pain in the ass, because I wanted to get in there, and they didn't let me in.
You don't care. You didn't care at that point.
No, I wanted to know why I was rejected, because I knew I had to be in this thing.
Okay.
So anyway, I'm still rejected. So the August of 1988 rolls around. I show up for the first week at the seminar, and I meet Desikachar, and I'm in a large group, and he's lecturing, and we're practicing, and we're doing all these things, and you know how sometimes there's someone in a class who asks a question that's not really a question. It's just intended to display their own knowledge of the subject that's being discussed.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that was kind of me.
Okay. Well,
Because I was going over the heads of these people. I was going straight to Desikachar to let him know that I was someone
who knew
to
something.
be reckoned with. Yeah. And it's really so much to his credit that he could see through that.
And maybe know how to address it, because sometimes you can see it, but you don't know what to do with it. No?
Exactly. Well, he saw that I was sincere. He saw that I was sincere and that I really, really wanted to be connected to these teachings. And then he checked with Gary, who knew me a little bit, and Larry, who knew me a little bit more. And they vouched for me.
Oh, good.
And so based on that, I was accepted into the second week.
Good for you. I'm glad, because now you're here.
The squeaky wheel. Yeah. But it was embarrassing. When I think back on it, it was just so embarrassing. But then, I get people like that sometimes in my workshops, and I say, oh yeah, you remind me of someone.
And then you can handle it more gracefully too.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
If I could handle things as gracefully as Desikachar did, even a fraction of that, it would be good.
Yeah. So. Okay. Does he have videos? I've never seen videos of him.
Of Desikachar?
Yeah, teaching.
There are some videos. I have some footage that no one else has, because years later, I worked with the Aperture Foundation on a seminar at the KYM on yoga and alternative healing systems. It was supposed to be turned into a book. Aperture was the publisher of Health, Healing, and Beyond, which is a book that was out of print for many years, but it's available now, which is
yes, I've got
Health,
that.
Healing, Beyond Yoga and the healing tradition of Krishnamacharya, right?
Yes.
So I actually helped make that book happen, because I introduced Desikachar to the head of the publisher, Aperture, who was a very close friend of mine.
Okay.
And so I worked with Aperture to produce this event in 1996 in Chennai. And we have footage from that of Desikachar talking and teaching and presenting, and it was being put into like sort of a mini documentary to raise funds for the book project, which never happened. And so I think I'm the only one that still has this particular footage of Desikachar. Oh, wow. But there's stuff on the web of him being interviewed and him answering questions and things like that. So you can definitely find footage of him out there.
Yeah, I will look. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and I have a collection of it, and that's one of the things I'm building into this online platform that we're building right now.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to start talking about that now? Hang on.
I don't know. Ask whatever questions you have. We can talk about that whenever.
You call yourself a yoga educator. So I would like to know, or for you to explain to yoga teachers, therapists, and instructors why. And
well, it's something I started calling myself when I decided to stop calling myself a yoga therapist. So perhaps it would be clearer if I could say why I stopped using that designation.
Yes.
So first of all, there's a sort of a legal regulatory reason, I think, for not using the term therapist, at least in this country, in America. I know that there's different healthcare systems and licensing and regulatory mechanisms in all different parts of the world. Europe is different in general than America. Then each country in Europe has its own way of designating things, right?
Yeah.
Right. So for us here in the States, what we have is still quite a bit of freedom to practice and train practitioners in whatever way we see fit, without undue regulatory interference from the government. Unlike physical therapists, massage therapists, these are all licensed professions.
Oh, yeah, it's still not licensed in America, but you can be in. You can get insurance, no? And
that's a question of context.
Okay.
For example, if I do a session with someone and they want to get reimbursed, there's certain billing codes that they could use to submit, which don't require the practitioner to be licensed.
Oh,
right. And I have had clients who have been reimbursed, but they have to chase after that money themselves. It's not like I'm going to say, okay, just give me your insurance information and we'll do the session, and then I'll chase after the insurance company to pay me. That's a very expensive thing to do. You know, doctors employ full-time people whose sole job it is
to get money from insurance,
to get reimbursed from people's health coverage. And that's getting increasingly difficult in the States. A lot of doctors have decided to stop taking things on assignment, period. And they let you chase after your insurance company. Good
for them.
Yeah, well, but you know, it's just that's the way it's gotten to. And so anyway, to have yoga become part of that whole thing, to me was always like a terrible outcome. And I didn't want to do anything that would make that more likely. And I think when you use the word therapist, you're making it more likely. And this is a conversation I had for many years with the leadership at IAYT about, like, can we please just take a stand as a community, as an organization, on whether or not we're in favor of yoga therapy eventually becoming a licensed healthcare profession.
Yeah.
And I'm against it, but if the leadership at IAYT decides that's a good thing, then say so and say that this is what we're working for or working towards. If we're against it, let's say so. Like the Yoga Alliance, for example, is against government regulation of the training of yoga teachers.
Okay.
And has fought very successfully on a state-by-state basis here in the US against it whenever they try to impose it. And that's one of the most valuable things about their mission, I feel.
Yeah.
You know, you can say whatever else you want about the Alliance and the registry and, you know, whether they're doing a good job at that or not. But as long as they have the resources to fight what I consider to be the good fights, in terms of their advocacy to keep yoga free from regulation, I will support that. It's a little different. And by the way, that's why the Yoga Alliance had to get out of the business of implying that people were qualified to do yoga therapy based on their Yoga Alliance training.
Of course. Yeah.
Yeah. So they, at a certain point, had to really separate themselves from that and from the language of yoga therapy or therapeutics. They did it in a kind of a not great way when they implemented the policy, because they developed an algorithm that would scrub anyone's profile from Yoga Alliance if they mentioned the word therapy.
Ah, yes, I heard that.
You kind of remember that. That was a big deal back then.
Yeah.
Right? So they've since refined the algorithm, I think. But what they couldn't have was people implying that through the 200 or 500 hours of training that the Yoga Alliance was sort of administering, that they were now qualified to deliver some kind of therapeutic training to people.
Yeah, of course.
Because that would completely undermine their mission of keeping the government out of their business. Because once you start making therapeutic claims, you have regulators who come in and say, hey, what's up with this? You're not licensed to do this. You're not licensed to work with people, you know, and let's work with you to turn you into a licensed professional. And so it was pretty clear that the Alliance wanted no part of that. It's never been so clear whether IAYT wants to be part of that or not. And they've been walking a tightrope for many, many years on this issue. For me personally, the word therapist was a problem for a lot of those reasons.
Okay. Yeah, because there's a lot of conflict and uncertainty.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so, and all of that aside, the sort of government regulatory stuff aside, I don't think the word therapist best describes what I do. I think educator does. Because if you look up the word therapy, it implies that there's some kind of intervention going on. Whereas what we do is we're helping to educate people about how their own bodies work.
Yeah, I call myself a wellness educator because
I think that's honest, and it basically frames the conversation in a better way.
Yeah.
By therapy, it's like we're trying to be
to change
what other people do.
Yeah.
And I've always said that the main distinction we have is that we're the people you come to who are going to remind you of what's still going right in your system, what's still working.
But I think some good therapists, whether we're talking psychotherapy or physiotherapy, they also do that. They also educate.
They do.
Yeah.
And they also are very well trained in pathology.
Yeah. Okay. But I think that's shifting too. Like I've got a physiotherapist now, and she's really like, if I ask her, why are we doing this? What effect is this having? She will explain. I think that's
any good medical practitioner should be an educator.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is we go to them and they are licensed to do what they do because they've been trained to be experts in what's gone wrong with the person and how to help fix it.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think that there's two sides to the power dynamic, because there's this authority, and we've also been educated as a culture to be infantile and to be dependent and to go to experts because they have the answer, not thinking that we should also understand how they got to that answer.
Well, sure. But that's a question of methodology and how you see yourself and what your role is when you're dealing with patients, right?
Yeah.
But what I would say for a yoga therapist, educator, whatever you want to call it, the main focus and methodology is we're going to work with us still going right.
Yeah.
You can move, you can breathe, you're awake, you can focus your attention. If you can do any of these things, even a little bit, you can do yoga. And we're going to focus on that. And expand. It's not like we're going to ignore the stuff that's gone wrong.
No.
But it's not our job to be experts in that. It's our job to focus on helping you connect with prana, the life force. And as long as you're drawing breath, as long as you're conscious, as long as there's movement and life in you, you can do yoga and you can heal. See, and this is where you get into the distinction between, fixing and healing. You can heal your relationship to a problem or a disease or an injury or something without it necessarily being fixed, And Desikachar was very, very clear on this. This was his main ethos, really, is that what heals is the relationship.
Trust.
Yeah. Yoga, a trusting, caring, attentive relationship is the vehicle for healing in yoga. He would say that the technical side of it has its place, it has its importance, but you can be the best technician in the world. And if you suck at relationship, you're not going to get the results. On the other hand, if you're brilliant at relationships and you're not the best technician, you'll still get good results.
It's true.
Yeah.
I think that has a lot to do with, if we're looking at physiology, the vagal nerve also, if there's that trust and how do you call that? Reciprocity. Thank you.
If there's a functional dyad, I mean, if you want to use the technical terms, the vagus nerve is getting a lot of attention lately because of polyvagal theory and its relationship to trauma and healing and all of that. And it's important because all of the things that the more evolved myelinated branch of the vagus nerve regulates is all the things that a baby uses to relate to its mother.
Yeah. Yeah. And
facial
that's that
expression,
trust.
vocal rhythm, all of this. And I happen to have a good
Contact.
friend who
Yeah.
studies this. She's one of
Yeah.
the top researchers in the world in
Who's that?
mother-infant
Oh, you
relationships.
mean Amy Matthews?
No,
Huh?
no, her name is Beatrice Beebe.
Oh,
She's published all over this field
wow.
for many, many years. And she has a lab here in New York that actually studies this.
Oh, great. Beatrice
But she had
Beebe?
never heard of polyvagal theory.
Oh,
And
wow.
she was like, what? And so, we've been having these conversations
Yeah.
about all of this. And she studies traumatic bonding also,
Mm.
But all of the things that she has her grad students coding on these films that she makes of mothers and infants, that's all the stuff that is modulated by the vagus nerve.
Yeah. Yeah.
Facial expression, vocal rhythm,
The ventral vagal.
mutuality.
Yeah.
Well,
Social connection. That's why social distancing was so horrendous. And it should have been called physical distancing. I found it so mean and subliminal that they were calling it social distancing. There was no need to be socially distanced. We should have.
Yeah, it makes you. It instills this fear around being other people and breathing the same air that they are. But a lot of terms are mislabeled, I think, in some important conversations that puts them exactly in the wrong framework from what they should be, like power imbalance, right?
Yeah.
Student-teacher relationship is referred to as a power imbalance. It's problematized from the get-go by the words we use.
Yeah.
That there's an imbalance, and that's a problem, and there's power at work.
Yeah, but power is not a bad thing. This is another thing I'm figuring out through writing my book. Power is amazing when we know it's about a win-win partnership relationship. Everything is in relationship, and we've got.
But it can never be balanced, can it?
No, because life is dynamic. We are never balanced. Everything is homeostasis and in shifting constantly, and we have to always adapt and find the best way for everyone involved, and that's complex because life is complex.
Well, it's made more complex when you use the wrong term to define a conversation.
Yes, language has a huge influence.
Here's one for you. Have you considered this, that what we're really talking about in a student-teacher dynamic, it's an asymmetry of responsibility. So let's forget power imbalance for a minute.
Tensegrity, kind of like that.
Well, think of this. Sometimes when you're trying to understand something, you need to strip away all of the inessential elements of the conversation and see what is at its very root.
Yeah.
Let's just say there's a room and there's people in it. And there's someone at the front of the room who's in charge of the room. This doesn't say anything about what's happening in the room. It could be as simple as a proctor supervising a test. Or it could be a bunch of people waiting to go into another room, right? But there's someone at the front of the room that's in charge of that room. There you already have an asymmetry of responsibility. Because whose responsibility is it to know how the ventilation works, where the emergency exits are, where the bathrooms are, right? How to get in and out of the space safely, right? I need to drink of water. The water fountain's down the hall. So the person at the front of the room is expected to have knowledge of these things so that the other people in the room are safe, right? That's just bottom line. People in a room with someone in charge, there's already an asymmetry of responsibility, and it's not a problem. It's the way it should be. It's not a problem.
Yeah.
Now, does that mean the people in the room have zero responsibility for verifying whether the person in the front of the room is doing their job well?
No.
You can't just blindly follow what someone says if what they're saying is stupid. If they say, oh, the emergency exit, yeah, you jump out that window. It's like, no, right? So you see what I mean? So there's never a situation where one person has 100% responsibility and the other people are just passive non-actors who have zero agency in their own safety. Right? Okay, so if that's the baseline of just people in a room with someone in charge, then you start layering in the conversation about what does it look like in a yoga space where there's a teacher and their students. Again, you can never have zero agency on the side of one party.
No, of course not.
But the way you hear about these conversations with power imbalances, it seems like that's what some people think.
Yeah, but then it's again, how do you understand power? It's also our language.
I can beat you up. That's power.
No, power means to do work. If you look it up in an old dictionary.
The physics meaning of power, yes. But is that what people mean when they say power?
No, because we've contextualized it differently in our culture for a very long time. We've equated it with domination and
exactly. And I don't want to bring that conversation into something which is actually pretty clearer when you think of it in terms of asymmetry of responsibility. Because in anatomy, when we talk about asymmetry, we're talking about how nature is, how human bodies are, right? People mistake these two concepts, symmetry and balance, for each other sometimes. And you see people obsessing about their bodies, trying to make them symmetrical.
I used to do
that. Right?
Yeah.
So nature tells us that asymmetry, number one, is not a problem because it's reality. It's the way things are put together. And that balance is possible, but you don't achieve balance by removing asymmetry because you can't. And that's the problem, I think, with power imbalance. It brings the wrong conversation that problematizes these things right from the get-go. Right.
Because everyone has this different idea of what power is.
Of course. And the bottom line is, at its very root, if you're talking about men and women, for example,
well, that's not the very
imbalance, because most men can beat up most women. If it boils down to a physical conflict.
Yeah, but inside, women are much more powerful than men.
Absolutely. What do you mean by power?
Okay. Yeah.
A woman can look at her own blood and not faint. There you go. That's kind of power, right?
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah, there's different. I think, it's also that we've grown up with power as being associated with politicians and people who are corrupt. That's one.
Power over other people is political power. Yes. Yeah. Right.
Rather than the actual essence of power. Like if we're talking about Shakti or life energy, it's also a power, and it has there is the ability to destroy, but she moves through a whole phase of creation and sustaining before that destruction. And the only reason destruction happens is to regenerate. So I see power in that sense as life.
Absolutely. But you see, those are really interesting and valuable conversations about power. But if I'm trying to clarify the responsibility of a teacher and of a student in a learning environment, I'm not necessarily interested in having those conversations.
Okay.
I want to say, okay, what would it look like? What would it really look like if the teacher had 100% responsibility for the student's experience? Wouldn't that make the student just a lifeless mannequin without consciousness, without the ability to choose when to breathe, or if they're breathing, or any ability to make any choices whatsoever in relation to what they're being taught? That's what it looks like. That's what it would actually look like for a teacher to have 100% responsibility for the student's experience. And that with a living being at the other end of that dynamic, that could never actually be. What would it look like for the student to have 100% responsibility? The teacher would be an automaton that would be programmed by the student to say,
algorithms.
say and do exactly what the student wanted or expected.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's not a learning environment, right? So when you take things to their extreme, to their reducto ad absurdum, it's like, okay, it could never be that.
Yeah.
It's never zero responsibility on either person's part. So, and I would say, lest I be accused, as I have been in the past, of being a victim blamer here.
No, you're right. I totally agree.
The teacher always has more responsibility than the student. Always.
Well, yeah.
That's the nature of it. You've taken on that role as a teacher.
Yes.
It's not 50-50. Not 50-50. Okay. It's this, the teacher has more than 50% responsibility in that situation, but it's never 100. It doesn't mean the student is ever at zero.
No.
Well, I know, but because you're a reasonable person, you say yes. But for me saying that in the past, people have accused me of being a victim blamer, right? To suggest that people had some choice in the situations in which they found themselves.
Like that. Yeah, but then it's a lot of unconscious things going on that we don't realize. And
it's a different conversation. Absolutely.
Different conversation, but it's part of the reason.
Yeah.
But
it's a conversation that experts should be weighing in on. Experts in trauma, experts in developmental consciousness, experts in what happens to people's ability to exercise their agency.
Well, I don't think we should
severely challenged by trauma in their development, right?
But I don't think we should exclude these conversations, even as yoga teachers. We should be having these.
No, but they are their own conversation.
Yes.
They are their own. You see, but if those conversations don't happen in the context of the other one, which acknowledges that there is some agency on the student's part, then it just turns into a screaming match.
Yeah. Okay.
And it turns into, people wanting to cancel other people over their opinions.
Yeah. But that's because it's taken out of context.
Yeah. And it's all about, see, that was Desikachar's main teaching. It's all about context.
Yeah.
And the context is the individual.
Yeah. Yeah. And the environment.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
In fact, Krishnamacharya had a list, of all the different bits of context that you have to be aware of when designing a practice for somebody. What is their age? What is their gender? What is their capability? What are their aspirations? How much energy they have.
Well, that's what yoga therapists should look at too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. There's Sanskrit words for all of those things, but Krishnamacharya was very clear about all of the bits of context that were necessary to consider for an individual.
Of course.
Yeah.
That's what I love about yoga therapy. It's that you adapt the yoga to the person, not the person to the yoga.
That's 100% a quote from Krishnamacharya.
Oh.
Did you know that?
No.
You didn't know that you were just quoting Krishnamacharya?
Well, I've read it many times. I don't know, but it's just something you do now at some point. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's 100% attributed to him.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. In fact, there's a lovely article that lays this out. So the list are Deha, Desha, Linga, Kala, Vayas, Shakti, Marga, and Vritti.
I've got this somewhere. I've got this somewhere in one of his books. I don't know which book.
That would probably be in Heart of Yoga.
Okay, yes.
Yeah.
And
so it's a place, sex, time, age, capacities, aspirations, and activities.
Yes.
That's context.
Yeah. So important.
Absolutely. And that's why Desikachar sometimes would have this reputation for being secretive or evasive, that sometimes people would think he was, just not like he would never answer a question directly. But it was only certain types of questions he wouldn't answer directly because they lacked context. And he would say things like, "Oh, well, it depends," or "It's negotiable." Show me a person, and I can answer it.
Yeah.
Like, what's the best asana for helping sciatica? It's like,
it
who are we
depends.
talking about? Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. Because lots of therapists say it depends.
Of course it depends.
Yeah.
And a lot of the ancient texts actually are very prescriptive, and they will say this asana, if you do it for 20 minutes, will banish sciatica. Sure, just read the Hatha Yoga Pradipika.
I was just going to say that's from the medieval times, the Hatha Yoga times. Yeah, they were more prescriptive.
And in Krishnamacharya's early work, like if you read the Yoga Makaranda, he's referring to things very much in the same way.
Yeah. And also Iyegnar, I believe, in the back of his book on Light on Yoga, I was doing a lot of his sequences for headaches or for cold.
And it's very prescriptive, and it is absolutely not reflective of what Krishnamacharya's mature teachings would say, which is pretty much the opposite, which is yoga should be adapted to the individual, not the other way around. And incidentally, since you're so familiar with Light on Yoga, have you ever looked at Yoga Makaranda, which is the book in 1934 that Krishnamacharya published?
Yes.
It's so clearly, the format is so clearly the inspiration for Light on Yoga.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. No, it's nice. As you get older, you can see all those things and where it all comes from and the layers and how they evolved and how you as a teacher start to evolve as well, and see just my body getting older. The practice just becomes a lot more gentle. And
it has to.
And you work with different kinds of layers rather than the physical body. Yeah.
One of the most common things I say to clients when they come in, because I made my living as a body worker for many, many years.
Oh, really?
And that was how I supported my family before the book came out, and before we had online courses, and before I had this amazing thing called passive income. It was all body work. And I, as I mentioned, I had a lot of dancers as clients, and athletes, and yoga people from the yoga community who came in and they had hurt themselves doing one thing or another. And, they'd say, oh, well, I always used to be able to do that asana, and now like I'm having this problem. What's going on? And the most common thing I would say in response to that is, well, for one thing, you've never been this old before. Just consider that. And,
it's a hard reality to face when you love using your body a lot.
Sure, because they just want me to fix them so they can go back to doing the same stupid shit that hurt them in the first place. And it's like, well, hang on a sec here. You've never been this old before. You got to really,
let it sink in.
Let's look at the reality of the situation here. And if I tried to practice now the asana that I was doing when I was in my 20s, I'd put myself in the hospital. I mean, I'm glad I did that when I was young, when I was able to, because you put that in the bank. You put that in the bank, and I was young enough that it kind of did deflect my development of my body and my mind and my breath in a certain positive direction. And I'm actually thankful for the fact that I was lazy enough, along with all the practice I was doing. My fundamental nature is pretty lazy. I didn't really push it. I didn't get like so super competitive with the advanced asanas or the advanced variations or this and that. I just didn't want to put in the effort. And thankfully, because of that attitude, I didn't really injure myself too badly. In my early yoga days. And so many friends of mine actually did push a little too hard, and now they have these lifelong things, and they're getting hip replacements.
No. I have a teacher who has 2 hip replacements even.
No, I was just talking to a friend in California the other day who had both of hers done at the same time, and I said, well, do you think it was from all that Ashtanga and the hip?
Exactly, Ashtanga usually.
She was like, because sometimes you don't even realize that perhaps you're born with shallow hip sockets. Some people are born with this kind of dysplasia thing where their hip sockets are actually a little too shallow. But they jump into something like Ashtanga practice. It's like, oh, I'm really good at this. I can wrap my legs behind my head, right? And so you kind of exacerbate this underlying thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, after a certain number of years of that, you end up not being able to walk so well, and you need new hips. And it happens pretty consistently in our community.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. A lot of people.
Particularly because we attract people that tend to be hypermobile.
Yeah, I felt confident doing yoga because I could do it all.
So are you a little hypermobile yourself? Is that your...
Not hypermobile, but I'm flexible and I can do all of the things, or I could do. Now I've definitely moved back quite a lot.
Well, I'm going to suggest that for your I was checking through your guests in your podcast. You have a very impressive list of people you've spoken to. But someone you should talk to is a friend of mine named Liby Hinsley.
Okay.
Who is in the process of bringing out a book, a very necessary book, called Yoga for Bendy People.
Okay.
And she's a physical therapist. She's an actual therapist who also does yoga therapy. And she herself is hypermobile. She has Ehlers-Danlos, which is a connective tissue disorder, which makes your connective tissue unstable. She would be a great person to talk to, particularly because this book is about to come out. I'm having her on my podcast. I'm doing my own podcast.
You have a podcast?
Well, I'm gathering interviews. It hasn't been released yet. I'm going to have a lot of stuff sort of already in the can, so to speak, before I come out with it. But that's part of this new platform I'm building. So
wow. And you're doing this with someone else? The platform?
No, the platform is mine. It's going to be, the Breathing Project is now going to be an online project. Exactly. Yeah. So what I was about to say is that my focus in my podcast is going to be interviewing other clinicians, people who specialize in working one-on-one.
Okay.
And we'll talk about their work and the background of their work. And the unique part, which is actually, this is the premium part you have to subscribe to on my platform. But the second half of the interview will be me and this guest reviewing video of them working with a client.
Oh, wow.
And talking about the work they do.
Oh, wow. Great.
So the unique part of this is you get to be a fly on the wall for a private session, which you would ordinarily never get to see because they're, private. So because this is where the real magic happens in the work that we do, as you know, is this relationship, this connectedness you have with the person you're working with, and using our skills, using our training, digging into our bag of tricks whenever we have to, and sometimes just inventing something that we've never had to do before for this one particular person.
Yeah, right? It's every time.
Exactly. Yeah, technically it's called pulling it out of your ass, right? It's like, where did you learn that? Oh, I just pulled it out of my ass, right? That's how we talk here. Anyway, you can bleep that if you want. So this unique window into the one-on-one aspect of yoga is really going to be sort of the prime attraction on this platform I'm building. But it'll include all this other footage that I have. I have archival footage of Desikachar, as I mentioned. I have all of these lessons that I put up on the internet back in 2020. And so that'll be there. There's going to be a whole upgrade that you can do to interact with the cadaver-based anatomy.
Really?
Yeah. Wow. So that'll be there as well.
Oh, wow.
So it'll be a fun collection of things, and it's building a community. Basically, it's building a community where people can interact and ask questions and talk, and I can moderate and answer some questions, but people can relate to and connect with each other.
Oh, that's so great! It's really
it's aimed at folks like us, people who are in this yoga therapy, working one-on-one with people world. And I don't think anything like it has ever been done. So I'm very excited about this thing that we're building. And it's going to be at breathingproject.com. So that's going to be the URL where you'll eventually find it.
Yeah.
Launch. Yeah.
Great. I will put everything in the links. So
cool.
In the show notes. Yeah.
And I should interview you at some point because you work one-on-one with people, right?
Yes. Yes.
And you have a particular focus. I was reading in your bio because you've come to this place of working with on the emotional level with people, and of course what we do is very powerful in that realm in terms of breath and movement and awareness. So I would love to hear about how you work with individuals.
Great. I would love to come on.
And a lot of us actually have video of us working with people because we've done so much on Zoom in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
So all you'd have to do is get permission from one of your students to share it.
Oh, wow. And how long are these videos? It should be a whole session or just
we would dip in and out of the session. I would let you say, okay, here's one of the key moments, right?
Okay.
Of when I was working with this person, and it was like, oh, that's cool. Like, what made you think of doing that? Like, and then to go into the thought process of why you decided to work this way, and then when they responded in the way they did, why did you take it to this next place? So it's really sort of opening you into the thought process of how we work.
Yeah, it's dissecting.
It's just another kind of dissecting, exactly, or deconstructing, if you will. Yeah. So like we wouldn't sit and watch a whole hour all at once. It's sort of like, when you have a DVD box set and the director is talking about the scenes. So
really
it's like the
boring.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like
but this won't be boring for us nerds.
My audience is the people that won't find this boring.
Oh, exactly.
We're going to be fascinated at seeing something that you would never ever get to see, which is the private sessions and how someone works inside the private sessions. I learned a lot from Desikachar when he shared his process of working publicly. Because there were some seminars that he did where he would be up on the stage and he'd be sitting next to someone who, one of the people in the seminar, and actually doing a private session with them in front of everyone. And that was fascinating to me. It was boring to other people. Some of the other people who actually signed up for the seminar found it incredibly boring because they'd go, when's the yoga going to start? He's just talking to them.
Yeah, but I guess you have to have that kind of mind where you like that part of the analysis and searching, the kind of investigative mind.
And the thing is, when he actually would get around to giving them something to practice, by that point, he had become the best friend they ever had, the most attentive listener that they'd ever been in front of. They had been observed to such a degree in a loving, non-judgmental way
that makes
by the greatest observer that they'd ever been in front of. By the time he gave them this simple little breath awareness mantra, whatever it was he gave them, they would just
open up
like a flower, or come apart at the seams sometimes, if that was always necessary, right? So that to me was absolutely fascinating, and to the person sitting next to me is probably the most boring thing ever, because they wanted to learn what asana he would teach them that would fix their problem, right? And if you were looking for biomechanical analysis from Desikachar, you would be forever frustrated because he didn't think in terms of the biomechanics, even though he was an engineer.
I read somewhere you had said that often every person who came in would get muscle menos the same practice, but it was how he taught it. How he said it and
absolutely. Yeah.
Pauses.
You could teach apanasana 100 different ways to 100 different people.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. And that's what they would do at the KYM.
Yeah.
No, I was there. I was one of those people. I wanted to know, okay, here's the sequence for someone recovering from heart surgery, And there's like apanasana and dipadapitam and, just like, chakravakasana. It's like, okay, and I'm making notes, and it's like, okay, great. And then the next one, because I was observing at the KYM when I first went there, they let me stay in the room and watch the private lessons happen. And the next person would come in, and they had just, they had diabetes, right? Totally different from recovering from a heart problem. Apanasana, chakravakasana. But if you observe the subtleties of how the teacher was relating to the student and the breath, and then you can see, simple tools, but applied in a very sophisticated way, in a very individualized way. And that's one of the principles, is the simpler the tool you're using, the more profound a relationship you can have with it. And the other principle,
it's really adaptable, doesn't it?
Yeah. And if you're working with something that somebody does a lot of, in other words, if you can create even a tiny bit of positive change in something a person does a lot of, that adds up to a lot of positive change over time. Right? And so what do we do a lot of? Standing, walking, breathing, right? Sitting.
Yeah.
So so even a tiny bit of positive change to any of those things, because we do so much of them, adds up to a lot, which is why I work a lot with people on standing and walking, as well as breathing. We're breathing all the time. If you can just make even a little bit of an improvement in the way someone's breathing, you repeat that thousands and thousands of times a day, it adds up. It really, really does.
Yeah. Thank you, Leslie.
This has been fun.
This has been fun. Yes.
Well, the next time I'm over there in your part of the world,
let me know.
Yeah.
Well, I should keep up with you. Do you still
if you wanted to do that, you could log in to yogaanatomy.org. That's my personal website. The platform we're building will show up eventually at breathingproject.com. We still have some iterations and beta testing to do at this point. But that's within the next couple of months, you'll start to see things at breathingproject.com for this platform. And, we're going to make a special deal for early adapters so they can be our beta testers. So stay tuned for that.
Yeah. How long have you been busy on this? How long have you been working on this?
Oh, on the platform?
Yeah.
We've been doing research on which technologies to use for quite a while now. And I think we've figured out one of the key, this is an exciting thing that we found, just so you know, who we host the video with is important.
Okay.
Because not all video hosting is the same.
You mean Rumble or YouTube or Vimeo?
Yeah, but we're not using any of those.
Okay. Which one are you using?
We're hosting with a service called Searchy.
Oh.
Have you ever heard of Searchy?
No, but I'm going to write it down because I have resisted going online because I also don't know who to host with. So
well, here's the cool thing about Searchy. When you upload video or audio to Searchy, it gets run through their transcription engine.
Oh, wow.
So it automatically transcribes it and puts subtitles in it.
Oh, that's good.
And there's a transcript now.
Yeah. So you have all the content.
Yes, but the content is now searchable.
Oh, wow.
So you enter a keyword into the search field, like, I want to know every time Leslie says the word diaphragm.
Yeah.
Right? And you end up with a list of hits for the word diaphragm.
And you can have lots of videos on there.
you click on each of those hits, and it jumps you straight to the place in the video where the word is being used.
Oh, that's amazing.
That's very powerful. And it's going to make all of this content searchable. So you can definitely go through it from beginning to end, like it's a course. But if you have a particular interest and something you want to see right away, just enter the word and you can see where that word shows up.
So it's like an index, video index.
It's being indexed and it's being searchable. So
wow.
So figuring that part out was one of the key components. And then building that into this other service where we can have all the different content and the podcasts and everything else available. That's going to be fun.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
It's going to be fun. Good to see it that way.
Yeah. It's going to be fun mainly for my partner, Lydia, who's the actual web genius who's building all of this.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Is she a web genius or she had to become one?
She knows how to learn, which is amazing, because the technology evolves so rapidly.
I know
that you're always having to learn new technologies, and
I know. And
but part of the last 2 years for her, because she has other clients, she has clients other than me, is helping them move whatever they were doing online so that they can conduct their business through Zoom and all of that, and then integrating things like Salesforce into website. That's just, if she can handle Salesforce, I think she can deal with my little platform that we're building. So yeah. We're looking forward to that.
So great. Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Leslie, for being here. Namaste.
Namaste, Shira. Thank you so much. Okay.
Yes. Bye.
Bye now.
So thank you everyone for staying to the end of the podcast. I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. I really love doing these talks with these amazing people. And if you want to know more, just take a look in the show notes. There's plenty of links and ways to connect with either the guest or myself. If you want to work with us or find out more about us, just check out the information in the show notes. So I hope you have a wonderful weekend or week, and you'll be hearing from me next week. Bye.